and welcome to all our viewers. My name is Miraculin, and I am an occupational therapist working at PlayStreet, Bangalore, India. PlayStreet is an organization that provides educational services to help children with special needs become independent and live up to their potential. We also offer parent empowerment programs, school services, and a variety of clinical services. In the recognition of Autism Awareness Month, we would also like to center our discussions around augmentative and alternative communications, which is also known as AAC. So our goal for this Awareness Month is to emphasize the significance of AAC and the challenges associated with it and promote greater awareness to the autism advocacy aspect. So let's meet our speaker for today. Our speaker for today is Ms. Sarah Elsa Abraham. She is a speech language pathologist by passion and profession. So she's completed her bachelor's from Christian Medical College, Vellore, and she's also worked in the Department of Developmental Pediatrics after her bachelor's. And she's done her master's from All India Institute of Speech and Hearing, Mysore, after which she's worked in the government hospital and medical college set up in Belgaum. She's currently working as a speech therapist at PlayStreet. She's a certified feeding and oral placement therapist, OPT level 1, and she's had a wide exposure and training to both adult and children population with various communication disorders. She's passionate, fun-loving, and a firm believer that every child is unique and born with a purpose. And she also believes that every child has a voice of their own, and helping them to bring out to the world around them is something that always excites her. Parents are the best therapists, according to her, and she truly believes that by empowering and guiding them, we open new doors of opportunity for our precious ones. So, for the first segment, we are going to start on the topic of debunking myths and addressing practical challenges. So this is the first segment, which is under the broad title of AAC Conundrum, What and Why. So in this talk, Ms. Sarah will be debunking the various myths that surround AAC, and she will also help you all to understand the practical facts of the same. So now I hand over the talk to Ms. Sarah.
Thank you so much, Miraculin, for this opportunity, and welcome to all our viewers who are joining us, especially for this first talk. And we want to set the record straight of keeping the facts in place of that surround AAC and allow individuals, those who are looking into it and those who are already using it, that AAC is such an effective tool to bring about a voice for our children. So let's jump right in. So the focus for this Autism Hour, this month that we wanted to look at is looking into augmentative and alternative communication. And that is, we wanted to look at the impact that it causes in the lives of individuals and families. And we really want to make a difference and bring about that awareness and its importance. And the first segment, we've divided these series of talks over a lot of different speakers that you all can look forward to. And we just want to start off with just trying to getting everybody to understand the what and the why. What is AAC? Why do we do it? What are the difficulties? And so much more we will be covering over this entire month. Today, I just want to go right into the basics of augmentative and alternative communication. And I'm going to be addressing there are so many myths that surround it, and I'm going to be addressing some of the practical challenges that do come along with using an AAC. So before we even go into that, I think it's very, very important that we start off right at the base of augmentative and alternative communication. What do we mean by this? And just to put it out there, I think we need to start by when saying that alternative communication, we're talking about another way to communicate. For all of us, for most of us, we communicate in a lot of different ways, but I think the first part of it very easily that we say is we communicate verbally. And we think that if somebody can speak, that means that that person can communicate. So I just want to start off right at the base and just explaining what exactly is speech. And I want to be able to give everybody a proper understanding of the same. So it's just to kind of get into an idea. So starting off, when we say speech, now this might be something new. You might all think that if my child can speak, he knows how to communicate. But when we look at speech from a professional point of view, we are looking at speech as a purely motor act. When I say a pure motor act, it is just about moving my muscles or my speech muscles, that are muscles of my mouth that we use. It's just about how the person says it. Okay, so I'm looking at our articulators, that includes your tongue, your lips, your teeth, your palate, and moving all of this together to form a motor movement of speech. Now, to make that easy, if that sounds a little complex for everybody who is listening, if I had to say the word ball, your mind thought the word and it's come out, but it's so easy for us to say the word ball, but every part of my mouth is moving in a particular fashion for me to say that word. So my lips move in a particular way, my tongue moves in a particular way. So all of that it's a motor act that is planned out and that is said, and that comes out as speech. So when we look at speech, we're looking at three main components of it. So when we say articulation, it's about how we make the speech sounds, how each sound. So if you all try right now also, and if you try to produce every sound, that is, if you start from p, b, m, f, w, all of us, we have particular places in our mouth that we use when we say these sounds. Okay, so that is what articulation is all about. When I talk about fluency, it's talking about my rhythm, my rate, how I'm talking, how are the words joining together and how I'm saying it in a fluent way. That becomes my fluency. And voice is me using my voice, that is using my vocal cords. There is a motor movement that changes the air into speech. So this is what, when we say speech, this is not completely communication. It is just a very, very small part, and it is a completely pure motor act. We want to get that ingrained right at the beginning before we go on to studying so much more about this. And I really hope it makes sense at the end of this presentation. So going on to, there's another component of communication that we generally overlook, or it does overlap, and that is language. Okay, so if I look at language, and by definition, it is a system of conventional spoken, manual, or signed or written symbols. It's a system that is in place. Now, we've got two parts to it. Again, there is understanding language, and there is, again, expressing language. So there are two different parts. Now, when we say language, it is about the child's ability, or even a person's ability, to understand what we're saying. Now, if I give a command and I say, can you pick up the ball? The understanding of what I've said so far, and to tell a child, okay, that's a ball, he needs to be able to register that that's a ball, I need to go there, I need to pick it up. All of that is understanding, or understanding concepts of, big and small, or, everyday instructions. There's so much to it. Now, that is language. I don't necessarily need to speak it to understand. I already understand it before I express it. When I say expression, that's when we have one part of it, which is the verbal expression. There's a whole other part of it which is nonverbal. So in language, also, when we're looking at, we've got the meaning of the words. So when I say, you've got the word ball, it's already, there is a symbol in your mind of a round, colorful thing that we used to play. The moment I say it, you've already formed that imagery in your mind. Now that is the meaning to the word that is already been given. Or if I say the word dog, you already have an idea of what a dog looks like. You already have a imagery or a symbol that's already in your head. So the same thing happens in even if I use a different language, if you're able to understand it, you will know that she is trying to say that this is a dog. Okay, so we know that dog refers to a four-legged animal and it barks. It's very easy for us to connect this. Again, it's very, very abstract. There is a lot of thinking that goes into place. Even before we say out dog, I'm already thinking, okay, animal, four-legged, barks, we have it at home. These are all thoughts that are already gone in my mind. And that is meaning, adding meaning to the word. So that is one component of language. Now, like I said before, language can be expressed verbally, through speech, through writing. It needs to be understood. And there's a way that we convey and share these messages also. Another part of it is the phonemes, or the sounds, how we say these sounds. There's another part of it, the grammar or the syntax. Again, that's another component of languages. How do I place my sentences or my words in my sentences? Those are things that I already have processed in my mind, and that's where I'm talking from. And again, that's another part of it, that is pragmatics. Now, when I'm looking at pragmatics, it's using words in socially appropriate ways, or using it in the right context. Now, I can ask the question, I can say the sentence, is this okay? and you will know that I'm saying that as a question. Or even if I change my tone, even if depending on the context or the situation that I'm using that statement, it will have different meanings. And that all encompasses language. There's a lot of systems, there's a lot of rules that are set in place for the way we speak, how we speak, the words that go into making a sentence, all of that come into language. Now, does speech and language come together? And okay, do we have communication? No, there's a whole other part of it. And that is the biggest umbrella term that we want you all to understand today is communication. Okay, now this is the overall umbrella that I would say that we have speech and language as components of. Now, what do I mean by communication? When I'm talking about communication, it means that there is an ability to exchange my information. It's always a two-way street. I tell this to all my parents. Communication is a two-way process. There is an active process of exchanging information and ideas. And that involves both. It involves both understanding as well as expression. And even when it comes, it is not limited to speech. It is very important to understand that. Many of you might ask, no, but we all talk. But if you take, every person communicates in a different way. If I take a baby, if I take an example of a baby, a newborn baby communicates by crying. If you ask a newborn mother, they will know, oh no, my baby is crying. Either the baby needs a diaper change or the baby is very hungry. We don't know. So that's how they communicate. Or as the child starts growing a little more older, they start pointing at things, they start pulling you towards things, and they start playing around with their sounds. These all are communications. We don't separate that and we don't say, okay, just because my child, you don't expect a 2-month-old child to be speaking and telling that they want milk, right? So it's exactly that. Communication encompasses so much more than speech. You've got children reaching to things, you've got them pointing, you've got them looking at certain things. And you may find that your child is actually trying to communicate. And even children who have language difficulties, you will see that they are very, very strong communicators. They find ways to get their message across to people without actually using their words. The key here is to understand what are they trying to communicate. And that is a very, very important thing. So you may have a child who has difficulties even trying to express that non-verbally. They don't know how to communicate and tell, hey, this is what I want, or even point or show. There are a lot of difficulties that happen. But the most important thing that when we are looking at is we are actually focusing on communication and not just speech, not just the motor act. If my child is taking me and showing me that he wants to eat a biscuit, and he's pointing at the box of biscuits, and I'm just going to wait there and they're like, no, you've got to say biscuit, and then only I'm going to. What you're doing at that time is you are misleading, or you are kind of shunning that child away from actually what he's trying to communicate. And that does have other repercussions too. So another very, very important thing that I want you all to remember, like I just now said, is we all want our children to communicate. You're not just looking at the verbal speech. You are looking at your child communicating. So when all of you come to us for therapy, when you come to a speech therapist, all of you, ma'am, we want him to talk. Ma'am, we want her to talk. But there is so much more to that. You are actually coming and asking us, we want our child to communicate. We want them to be able to express their needs. We want them to be able to pick their words, make meaning out of it. There's so much more to it. And that happens only when there is an intent. Now, when I mean intent, there is an internal motivation, or I need to get something. And that's why I communicate. I need to express my thoughts, and that's why I communicate. Now, what happens is when we stop our children from communicating, whether verbally or non-verbally, or we put them in a box and say, hey, we need you to communicate in this way, we're kind of putting them and saying, no, only this is possible. So what you're doing is you are diminishing that need for them, or diminishing that intent to communicate. When there is an intent, again, it starts with that. It starts at the base of there is an intent. Now, intent does not mean only for needs. I know a lot of therapists, I know a lot of professionals, I know a lot of parents who say, my child can express their basic needs, so they know how to communicate. But if I ask all of you, do you only talk when you need something? Do you only talk when you want something? I think we go much more beyond that. If somebody does something to you that you don't like, I'm very sure many of us go to a place where we say, oh no, I really did not like that. Or if somebody gives you a food that you don't like, I don't want it, thank you. we use our words, we use our communication, we use our speech in so many different ways. It just does not, it's not restricted to wants, needs, or, there's, if I need to learn something from another person, it's me listening to them and then asking doubts. There's so many things. There's asking questions, there's expressing emotions and feelings, and so much more that happens, and how we initiate a conversation, how we end it, how we continue or we take a flow during the talk. All of that happens through communication. And so it just doesn't restrict to basic needs and wants. Now, once the intent is created, now, for example, I'm going to try to give as many examples to make this easy for all of us to understand, is that when that intent, if I'm looking at a very nice box of chocolates or ice cream, something that I really like, and it's away from me, but I really want it, immediately there is an intent created. Oh, I want to eat that. We create that. There is an intent that is internally formed inside of me, and I'm motivated by that, but it's not anywhere near me, and I've got to ask somebody else to help me get it. What we do is we think about what we want to say. Now, I want to say, Auntie, give me ice cream, or I want to say, Mama, please give that to me. I'm already, I'm thinking of what I want to say to get it. And the moment I think about it, I start telling my language centers in the brain. There are, again, different centers that we use for recollecting the words and putting the words out. Okay, these are the words. This is how my mouth needs to move to say these things. And I put all of those things together, and my brain sends out a plan to my mouth. Okay, now the planning of the motor movements in a very coordinated way. So I don't go to say, me want ice cream or ice cream want me. That's not what I do. My brain is already telling me this is, again, that's language. The language center of the brain is putting the words in order and saying, I want ice cream. Yes, so there is a way that we communicate. Now, like I said before, there is so much more than just wants and needs. If I don't want something, no, I don't want to eat that. I'm so, thank you so much. Or if the ice cream doesn't taste good, I say, oh, I don't think that tastes really nice. Or if somebody comes and asks me, did you like the ice cream? Or I respond and I say, no, I really did not. There's so much more that we communicate and go beyond our wants and our needs. So again, just to give you a brief of this, is speech, like we know it, is a pure motor act. It's just movement. Again, the brain tells us how you need to move, and it will move, but that does not necessarily add meaning. My child might be going around saying ball, 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 doll, 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 or saying these words. That's, again, just speech. Unless the child, is able to express or is able to communicate and say, hey, I want to play with the ball. That's, again, language, saying that if I need to think that the word for the toy is a ball, I need to put that together into a sentence, or I need to put that word across to somebody else to tell them, hey, this is what I want to do. That is a cognitive thing. You need your brain to be functioning for that. So that is very, very important. I know we've not come right into AAC, but until this base kind of sets in for us, it's actually very, very hard to understand why we do AACs, or why do we want people to communicate? Because most of the time, what happens is we all are focusing on the verbal communication, and that is speech, right? We all have our mindset focused on the verbal communication. But there are so many studies, and I'm sure all of us will agree, as technology has advanced, as we have so many apps that we use, or interfaces that we use to talk, that we don't really use a verbal mode of communication anymore. We've all gotten very, very used to using non-verbal mode. Now, you might ask me what exactly is non-verbal mode, and I will go into that. Non-verbal mode is nothing but using my gestures, I'm going to go into a lot more detail of that coming soon, but just to understand, is verbal communication, when I'm saying, is using the auditory communication with words. It's face-to-face, or it's on a video call, or you use language, and it's a verbal way. But technology has made us come to a part where we say, okay, I don't really need to speak it. You're still communicating. Now, if I want to tell my family, who's gone, if I want to tell my dad, he's gone to the grocery store, I might just send him a quick WhatsApp message. Hey, please buy this and come. I'm not really speaking it, am I? I've just sent I've just sent a written text. And that also is communication. Do we keep that away and say that that's not communication? No, it isn't. I've communicated the idea across. This is something that's not there at home. I need it. How is it easy for us to do it? But then when it comes to our children, we all are so focused on speech that we want them to only talk with their mouth and they communicate and get their things. Okay, so we've got nonverbal, you've got body cues. Again, I will go into more details of that. You've got facial expression, there's symbols, different things that we use for normal nonverbal communication. So there was a study that was done which said that if you actually look at it, only 7% of our communication is verbal. 93% of it is nonverbal. Even if I take, for example, the way we say thank you, different tones, different ways of us saying it have different ways, different meanings that it can bring across. And that is very, very important. So a combination of verbal and non-verbal is what makes communication effective. It is not contradictory. Please understand that it is not contradictory. You cannot have just one. If I'm just having a very monotonous speech and going, I like playing with the doll. If this is how I talk, it really doesn't, it's just, okay, it's just a statement. It doesn't give out the idea, or it doesn't express the feeling or the emotion. Those are things that all come in our nonverbal cues. So according to a study that was done, it showed that, most of it, like I explained here, 93% of our communication is nonverbal. So what I'm trying to explain here is that, again, these are not two separate entities. We need both of them to work together. We need both of them to be present, to be there for us to be able to communicate. So the foundation for communication, again, like I mentioned right at the beginning of this talk, is that communication starts nonverbal. When a child cries, the child is not verbally saying that he's not feeling well, or the child is not verbally saying that, he feels sick, or he's hungry. They communicate non-verbally. Crying is just a sound that the child makes, and we understand through that. So you've got facial expressions. So if somebody is trying to tell me, I really liked what you did, I know immediately that person is being very, very sarcastic, or I know that person is actually being, I really loved what you did. Even that small, changes in our faces and gestures, it makes so much of a difference to what we're trying to say. Our facial expressions play a role, our posture, the voice and the tone. These are all nonverbal things that we generally tend to look away, but these are all very, very important things that do come together. So nonverbal messages are primarily the way that we communicate our emotions, like I said. And, the face is one of the most important conveyors. So I can say something without any information, without any emotional attached to it. And you really will not understand whether I'm being sarcastic, whether I'm being angry, whether I'm being happy. All of these factors come together. And that's how we are able to understand what exactly the intent of communication is. Our body postures play a big role. If you go and you sit in, like when you sit in for a meeting, and if you're all slouched down, or you sit with your hands all tied like this, it immediately shows a defense. It's like, oh, you're not really wanting to take in the information that I'm putting across. But if I'm more receptive and I'm talking and I'm asking questions, or, if it just gives that openness, okay, she wants to talk and she wants to exchange the idea. So all of these things together play a big, big role. Okay. Tone, pitch, like I said before, your emotions, everything gets conveyed in these small things. Okay, that is very, very important. Now, what happens when we ignore communication? Like I said, we expect our children to talk verbally, or we are not taking any of these non-verbal cues that the child is trying to do. Is what we're doing is we are increasing their difficulty, and we're increasing frustrations. Many a times you will see children have the most difficult behaviors, and we look at it and we want to change the behavior, but actually they're trying to communicate something through that behavior. But we don't see that. We look at it and we think, oh, the child is just throwing a tantrum, and we think that. And the moment, because what happens, why that happens is, a lot of times is we are ignoring what they are trying to communicate. We are ignoring those subtle signs. We're ignoring what their face is trying to tell us. We're ignoring what they're trying to point to non-verbally, or where they're pulling us. We're like, no, you have to speak. And what happens is, again, we're just increasing opportunities for them to get more frustrated. And what happens is, you are decreasing places where they can actually feel included, where they can actually have opportunities to actually say something. And until we get this into our minds, we all come with a presumed notion. And I think we're going to be talking more about this later, is we all come with this preconceived notion that we know what's going on inside of them, or we know exactly what they're thinking, or this is their age and this is what they think. But what happens is we're putting them into a box and saying, okay, this is what you don't know how to talk, so we will talk for you, or you don't know how to say this, and we do that. And the moment we do that, we are just not giving them a place to be included. You're not giving them a voice to be heard. You're not giving them an opportunity. And that is very, very important. Everyone, and I think that's something that, like how we say, we've got our fundamental right, the right to speak. I think the right to communicate is everybody's birthright. It is everybody's. I might not be able to do it verbally, but everybody has a right to communicate. And it is our job, especially for our children who find it so hard in a world that doesn't allow them, especially in our cultures, in our context, where we're still trying to bring about awareness, where we're still trying to get people to understand that we are giving them these standards. Okay, this is how you need to communicate. But our children do have things that they want to tell us. And, we keep them away from it because we expect them to be a certain way. Now, what happens when communication becomes difficult? And this is, I think, the crux of our conversation, okay? And we want to come into talking about augmentative and alternative communication. Augmentative and alternative communication, again, these are two words. Now, I explained what communication is. There is verbal, there's non-verbal, it's an exchange of ideas. Now, when communication becomes difficult, now whether my child cannot speak, whether my child cannot express verbally or non-verbally, or anybody for that matter, is we are giving them another modality, or we are giving them an aid. Okay, so when I say augmentative, that means I'm giving them an aid to help them communicate. And when I say alternative, I'm giving them a different mode. Now, verbal communication is difficult. Hey, let's try another modality to communicate. And that's what I mean by augmentative and alternative communication. Okay, so when we say augmentative, we are just, supplementing existing speech. We're just giving them something that will help them. And alternative is when in place of speech, when speech is absent or it's not functional, we're giving them another modality to communicate. So why do we need it? Now, that's a very, very important question. Like I said, I said some time back, everybody has the right to communicate. Everybody should be able to say what they feel, what they think, whether verbally, non-verbally, and it is our job to give that voice to them. So when we take an AAC, we are looking at a way to enhance. We're finding a faster, effective, more something that helps our children to communicate. Now, this can be children who have speech and language difficulties, who have difficulty understanding language, who have motor difficulties. Now, we do have a lot of talks about dyspraxia. We do talk about verbal apraxia. There's so many more things that, that lead to motor difficulties. And so if a child has verbal motor difficulties, you're not going to have the child be able to talk smoothly, or it affects their way they speak. And so because of that, I'm giving them a modality. I'm giving them another way that will either supplement them or it will help them communicate. So you've got children who are minimally speaking. We no longer go by saying non-verbal, because I think they definitely have the capacity to. It's just they find it hard because of these motor planning issues. And you've got children who are non-speaking. So for all these people, we are working on getting them to bring about total communication. That is very, very important. So like we said, total communication, it's multimodal. It's not just, okay, I need you to say everything with your mouth and then only you are communicating. No, I'm using my facial expressions. I'm using my body language. I'm using my gestures. I'm using my AAC, and I'm using maybe the little speech that I have. Can I use all of this to understand that my child is trying to communicate something, or I'm trying to communicate? That is why we need to be able to use AAC. Now, there are different types. I'm not going to go a lot into these details. I'm sure many of you who might be watching this might know, but just to give a brief idea, when I'm looking at types of AACs, there are two major types. So you've got unaided or aided AACs. So when I'm saying an unaided AAC, it does not require an external tool. Now, that can, you just need some form of motor control. If the child is able to do, his body language, again, all of us use this in the way that, we express. Or children, you've got finger spelling, you've got gestures, you've got sign language of different countries, you've got manual signs, a few vocalizations and verbalizations that they have. That is unaided AACs that they use to supplement and to talk in exchange of having speech. When I talk about aided AACs, now this requires some form of a tool. Now, again, in that we've got light tech and we've got light tech or low tech that we use, and we've got high tech. Now, they either require an electronic or a non-electronic devices. So non-electronic devices are generally known as light tech or low tech. So if I'm saying light tech or low tech, I'm looking at communication boards, communication books, using objects to communicate, using pictures to communicate, photographs and schedules, or writing it down on paper. But when I'm looking at high tech devices, I'm looking at tabs, I'm looking at speech generating devices, I'm looking at different variations. You've got smartphones, you've got apps and softwares that you use. So all of this together come, and that's what, we have different types of AAC. So which AAC works, what works, there's a lot more details that we will be going into. But right now I want to bring our focus, and that is very, very importantly, I want to go about spending some time explaining about the myths about AAC. When we talk about myths, these are preconceived notions that we have that, we already think, okay, this is how AAC is going to turn out, or this is kind of going to limit our children. And I want to take some time just to debunk, or to actually tell you the truth and give you the fact about it, and just to understand that better, and just address a few practical challenges that do come up along the way when using an augmentative and alternative communication system. So the first one is, and this is something very, very common, it's a big concern for a lot of parents when professionals and speech therapists do tell that your child will benefit from an AAC, is this, that, ma'am, will an AAC device hinder or stop further speech development? And let me tell you all, no, it does not. And I'm not saying this, it is not just me. There's ample research that is there, that has been done, that says that AAC does not interfere with the child's natural ability to develop verbal communication. And why? And the reason is because they tend to use the most, and that's all of us, we tend to use the most effective and most accessible means to communicate, in whatever way it is. So AACs does not hinder or does not stop further speech development. In fact, research says the exact opposite. It actually can facilitate vocal communication, because there's a constant verbal mode that the child is hearing and it's being modeled to them. There's increased interaction that increases their confidence when that I am able to communicate, and it increases their confidence to a level for them to want to communicate and want to talk. So AAC does not, and let me break that down for everybody, it does not hinder or stop further speech development. The second myth that we hear a lot by a lot of people when they come to us, and I understand that this is definitely a concern that people do have, is that AAC is a last resort. But let me tell you this, when we counsel for an AAC, or when we tell that your child will benefit from AAC, it's not because we are giving up on your child. It's not because we are saying, no, he will not have speech, or we're just shutting the lid down on verbal expression, verbal communication. It's just that we are trying to find a way, that will enable the child to communicate faster, to communicate more effectively. And that itself builds up so much of confidence in the child, and we are not giving up on them when we say that. And another very, very important thing when we do that is that we are including, especially when you use an AAC devices, we are using verbal. It's not just them coming in, pointing at a picture or giving us a picture. We are using a verbal modality. We are modeling it to them, and it does improve their communication skills. Myth number 3. Now, this is a certain, I think, all the people do have this understanding is that, oh, my child should have a certain skill set. I don't think they will benefit from an AAC device because the child doesn't know or doesn't know how to match, doesn't know pictures, doesn't know symbols. It's not that way, because our children are able to identify over time, even when our children cannot read or even when our children cannot identify, our children are able to identify certain symbols that say, okay, I see the sign of McDonald's, and they know, okay, that's McDonald's, that's where we go to eat. It's not because somebody has taught that to them. So they don't need to have a certain skill set. It is that there are no prerequisites. Okay, there is enough research that shows that, again, let me say this, and this is just not me talking, but enough research to say that you do not need to have a certain skill set to use an AAC device. As long as a child, we are able to find the right way to connect to the child, we will be able to find the right AAC that works. So it can apply to a child's behavior, it can apply to their, gestures and, actions and sounds. And we start identifying, okay, what are they trying to communicate? And we are trying to add meaning to what they are trying to communicate. So it does not depend on controlling systems or, where the child needs to hold it. Yes, we definitely look at those features, but it does not mean that, okay, until my child reaches a certain, a certain skill set, that they will not benefit from AAC. So we start with what they can do, and then we move on to see what we can do to make it more how it can become more complex for them. And there is another thing that comes in that a lot of parents say, and a lot of professionals also actually say, is that AAC is only for children who have intact cognition or should, have a normal or a higher range of IQ. We put children, and they say they're too low functioning to learn from an AAC, and they must show skills of understanding. Okay, they need to press the button, or, they need to be able to match. They need to have communicative intent before considering AAC. Again, like I said previously in the previous myth, there are no prerequisites. Communication is a very, very basic human right. And what we're trying to do is just give it to them. An inability to communicate, okay? So it can interfere with a person's way of, if the child is not able to communicate, it can interfere with the way that they're thinking. So everybody, as long as, if there is a need for them that they need to communicate, we will find a way to get them to communicate. And another thing is that AAC has progressed so much over the years. Technology has advanced so much that it's moved so many levels that we can find the thing that works for each child. We cater it to meet the needs of each child. So that is very, 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 very important. Again, there's another thing that says that children have, to be a certain age to benefit from an AAC. Like I said, no, there is no criteria to say that a child has to be a certain age or to have certain skills. AAC is for all ages. The earlier you start with it, it becomes so much more natural to them. They're able to do it better. It actually, you will see it developing and facilitating their natural speech and language, and it increases their vocabulary. So there's no certain ages as young as, so even for infants, we go into using simple signs where they can indicate that this is what they need or they are in pain. And we go on from there to finding more complex things. And, as they keep growing, their vocabulary increases and we find ways for them to communicate. And there is nothing as a child is too young. There is nothing as a child is too old, and sometimes what happens is there is this constant thing, and especially I know in a context like India, it is very, very prominent. And I do hear a lot of professionals saying that, let's wait and see. He's only 3 years old right now. Maybe he will talk after some time. He's a boy, he will talk. So these are all common, misconceptions that do come along. But this waiting and seeing and postponing AAC until, we are like, wait, okay, they will start talking and we're doing that. It's kind of actually just, increasing the time where the child gets more frustrated. If we give them a strategy, if we give them a way to communicate, you will see that a child does benefit, and you will see a lot of the frustrations, like I mentioned before, it does come down. So it is very, very, very important to understand. Again, these are a few. I'm going to go into some more. These are just, I'm stating out the facts to say that no, child does not have to be a certain age. A child does not have to have a certain cognitive or skill set, and AAC is not a last resort. Another thing, and I've heard a lot of parents when they come and tell us this, is that only children who are not speaking or children who are minimally verbal, only for them that they need AAC. Okay, so this again comes from the factor that it's based on the belief that, having some speech, yeah, my child is able to communicate some of their needs. Okay, and that's more than enough. They're able to communicate that. But is that all? Like I mentioned before, the intent to communicate. What if our lives were restricted by only, I want to eat this, I want to do that, I don't want to go out? If our lives only revolved around our wants and needs, if all of us looked back, we would have just had a conversation about something very intense or something so silly, we would have been making jokes. All of that is communication. Okay, so there's so much of feelings and emotions that we would like to express. There's so many things, information that we want to transfer, and we sometimes miss out on that. And our children too should have a platform to be able to communicate all of this and not be restricted to, again, talking only about their wants and needs. And so what happens is, even when they start using AAC, some people go, oh, like, I want this, and it only restricts to wants and needs. There's so much more that we can work on in terms of communication. Yeah, like I mentioned right now, the next thing that on AAC is only for requesting. Sometimes our children have so much, and we have been surprised over and over again that, we are right now at this phase as therapists where we've come to, I'm not going to put anybody in a box. All our children are understanding something, and they might not be fully intelligible, but they still have, something that they want to share. And it is not an AAC device. It kind of gets restricted to be used only when a child wants something. It kind of gets restricted to only when there is a need, but there is so much more. There's a range of abilities. There's a range of varieties and places that we use our communication for. And an AAC device should be and must be used in all of these circumstances. You can go from greeting people, you can go to protesting, requesting. Again, all of those intents, like I mentioned before, all of that do come together. Another very common myth that we do see that people do have is that AAC increases my child's screen time. And yes, definitely there is a negative connotation that comes with screen time. But an AAC device, we generally, especially an AAC device that is used for communication, is generally excluded from that, is because communication is an active process. And now some parents, what happens, or many times you just give the child a tab and we expect the child to pick up and, okay, you communicate. Oh, my child is not communicating. But it's not about increasing screen time. It's about what are they doing with that screen, especially the high-tech devices. What are they doing with it? Is there an active form of communication that is happening? And when we give them that, when communication becomes active, I don't think that it definitely, you cannot put that into the filter of saying, oh, it's increasing my child's screen time, so I no longer want to use the screen. Another very, very, very important one is, like I mentioned before, the types of AAC is that people are taught that you need to be able to use the low-tech AACs that can be the communication boards, that can be using the picture exchange systems in place before they go on to using a high-tech device. And that usually comes from this thing, oh, my child needs to learn how to walk before they can run. And we put that into a box. But it's not the truth, because sometimes every child is different and they really pick up differently. There might be some children who are not interested in a screen, and there are so many more advantages when it comes to using a high-tech device in terms of we've got it all together. They don't have to, there's so many things that do come into place. And when it comes to both low tech and high tech has both of its advantages and disadvantages, but we are not telling that there is a certain hierarchy. We can use based on the child's needs. We can see what works for our children. Yes. So these are again some of the myths that are there around an AAC. And I really hope that it's clear enough to understand that these are all just myths. These are all preconceived notions, but there is so much more, and it's not the truth. There is actually the fact to it where our children are benefited with AACs. Moving on, I want to just focus on a few practical difficulties. And I know this happens very often. We all see it on everyday basis. It's very difficult to convince parents and children or whoever it is who work with the child that an AAC will be useful. And this is, I think we have a long way to go. And that is our hope and aim, that we are able to impact and say everybody has a voice. So there are some practical difficulties that do come into that. And sometimes one of the biggest ones that can happen is that paraprofessionals or training, like, most professionals who are working with the child, they don't really have the knowledge or the experience to kind of work with an AAC, or how do I work with an AAC? And that actually happens. So what happens is the child does get restricted and is not able to use the communicative device or use the communication in all places. Another important thing that does come along, again, these are all practical problems that we do see. And what happens is you're restricting the opportunity. You are not waiting for the child to communicate. There's no, there's no exchange that is happening. And we do see that even for children who go to school, teachers and a lot of individuals who work with the child, there's not a lack of, there's a lot of lack in terms of training how an AAC device has to be used, how can they go about using it. And it was a big barrier. It is, and I think it not just was, I think to date, it still is a very, very, very big barrier when it comes that when people around the child who needs to use the AAC device don't know how to use it. And sometimes for children who go to school, it is the teacher who spends the most time with the child. And they are one of the most significant communication partners there is with the child. And if they don't know, and if they don't know how to support this and how to facilitate this communication, it can affect the child's communication strategies. Another very, very practical issue, and sometimes that we do face when we work around with a lot of children, especially in our context, is that the funding that is required. Now, even for the devices, it's not very cheap. It does come with the pay. It does come with, sometimes it's not very easy for people to be able to take that kind of money into that. So that is a practical difficulty. And definitely, yes, there are a lot of apps that are coming out now, which they're trying to make it more cost effective. They're trying to make it more friendly for people, that everybody has a chance to communicate. And, it's to finding the right device, finding what works in all areas. It can get actually very, very difficult. And sometimes some of the key players when it comes into an AAC, it's not just, it's the family, it's the SLP, it's the teachers. And sometimes not everybody is not able to cater to that need. So even what happens is, even if a child is provided an AAC in a school, due to funding reasons, the child is not able to take the AAC back home. And that kind of restricts the child's communication only to the school. But none of us leave our voices at home when we go somewhere, right? We always have it with us. And that's something that needs to be portable. It needs to be in a way that the child can use it. With that said, there's a very, very important thing that we need to understand when it comes into is understand the cultural competency. So different backgrounds, we have a lot of different languages. We've got different, especially in India, a nation that is so rich with different languages where everybody does not follow the same thing. Finding, and yes, there are lots of softwares that do come up with AACs which cater to language needs also, but there definitely is a practical difficulty for a lot of people where it doesn't cater. Not everybody talks in English or Hindi, and we need to find different ways to be able to communicate. So that does act as a barrier. But there are a lot. Let me say that cannot be, because there are a lot of systems that are coming into place that offer a variety of languages. And for that, I think it comes to the base and the crux of what we're doing today is increasing that awareness and trying to make people understand that there is a culturally diverse people that need to use this, and being able to do that. That leads me to my next point, is that there is, because people don't know how to use an AAC, or to, because there is no awareness, how to use it. And there might be many reasons why. It can be, like I said, the device is it's too big, or people don't carry it around. There's a lot of technological problems that come in, and they just feel it's so much more better to not use it. And that kind of creates what happens, parents are like, oh, I don't want my child using it. Oh, we are facing problems. Oh, my child is only constantly using this for other things, and so many things. And what happens is we are stopping the child from communicating. And this is a very big misconception that we are really hoping to break, is that your child's voice is very important for everybody. It's not just restricted to the time at home. It's not just restricted to the time at the school or wherever they go. They should be able to communicate in all areas. And for that, everybody needs to be aware of what is the AAC that the child is using. How do we use it? How can I interact with it? There's so many things that I need to learn. And for that, we all need to be aware. And that is a very important thing. Moving on to the next one, there is a big lack, and I have seen this over the years and with so many families, is that there is a lack of home training program that does, that happens. And so what happens is, either the child is taught it in school or taught it during their therapy sessions, but nothing else happens out of that. And like I was mentioning before, we don't use AAC only at a particular, we don't use our voice only when we are in the house or only in school, and then we remain mute the rest of the time, or I don't communicate the rest of the time. It needs to be shown. Most of our children, if they are able to communicate, you will see behavior regulation. You will be able to, and that's where we see a lot of it, because they see that their behaviors are allowing them to communicate in a way that they do it over and over again. And this lack of home training is very seen, especially for families who've gotten an AAC for the first time, and they really don't know how to integrate it into the everyday life of the child, and it becomes very easy. Even when it comes to modeling an AAC, this is what happens. So we give the AAC to the child and we're like, okay, now you know it, go ahead and do it. It doesn't work that way. It's like learning a new language for all of us. It takes us time. You are reverting from one mode to another, or you're finding another way for the child to become effective. Modeling simply means showing the child what they need to do, and doing that with no expectations. That is very important. Showing them you have the AAC device, or you have the AAC pictures, you have it in front of you so often that every single time that you press on buttons, oh, okay, we're talking about this, we're talking about, oh, I'm feeling hungry, oh, I would like to eat this. You're giving them these words, you're constantly modeling this. Again, your professional, your speech therapist will be able to explain this better, and they will be able to give you an idea. But there is a definite need where parents and professionals and other caregivers need to be able to understand that everybody is educated on how to model, how to use it, so that when the child sees you using it, what happens is most times AAC becomes a question answer round. Okay, what do you want to eat? What is this? Can you choose? That's not what we want. Like I mentioned, communication has so many facets that we want to bring together, and it becomes very important that we use it in front of the child. It's not a magic thing that you give to your child and we expect that, okay, they know now, they can go about it, doing it by themselves. when the child has a naturalistic modeling where they're seeing it in everyday situations, where they're getting prompted to use it, you will see also verbal interactions also increase. And the voice output that is there for most high-tech devices, it constantly gives them a constant feedback of how the word sounds. And that also helps them in terms of their verbal expression. So it is very, very, very important for us to understand that modeling is one of the most important, and that's what we say in AAC is aided language stimulation, where we're showing it to them again and again and again, where they see that, okay, if I do this, if I press this, if I point at this, I am going to get this. And that is a very, very important factor. The creation for, again, this is all, I know that it does overlap, but very important things where we create AAC user-friendly environments. These are all practical difficulties. None of us want to wait. We think that, okay, he doesn't know it. We kind of presume that our child doesn't know it, and we just push through and we say, okay, it doesn't work that way. No, we need to cater. We need to create AAC-friendly user environments, whether it is, and this is for the entire world. We're all trying to get our children to be like us or talk like us and be able to do it when there is significant difficulties that our children are having. And what we're trying to do through this is try to help them. It is not subpar. It is not something that, okay, because they can't talk, that is why we are giving them this. We want them to be able to have that kind of environment, cater to those needs, whether it's in school, whether it's in, and I think that's something very important in our context, especially in India, where we need them to have AAC friendly environments where they can use it, whether it's going outside, whether it's going to a play area, wherever they go, that they get to use their AAC and that environments allow them to do that. Another practical difficulty, and I can understand this, it definitely does take a toll on a lot of people, but like all of us, our children do deserve it. And I think it's worth the time that it most definitely is personalization of an AAC dedicated device. Now, when I say a dedicated device, I mean that your AAC device that your child uses is for your child. It is not for, for us to be sitting and playing around with it, or where games are installed, where YouTube's there, or where, we can use it. Again, it has to be interactive. But if that is the purpose of the tab, the child is never going to learn how to use the AAC device. And also a very, very important thing is that it needs to be personalized to meet and suit the person who is using it, the communicator who's trying to, or the child who is going to use an AAC device. It does not, it has to be catered. Not every child likes to play with cars. Not every child likes to play with Play-Doh. We need to find out what our child likes, and we need to personalize the AAC device in such a way that it has things that our child's interest and that intent. That's what we spoke about right at the beginning, where we are able to create that intent, where they are getting that interest to want to communicate with us. So personalizing an AAC system is very, very crucial for the system. And that leads me to a very, very important point where we all think that it is the speech therapist's job to implement the AAC. Yes, definitely, granted that they know the understanding of it or how we go about it, but it is a team effort around the child, whether it's the parents, the family, the caregivers, the siblings, all other professionals working with the child, the teachers. Everyone comes together, and also the child, might I add, comes together to kind of create and personalize their device in such a way that the child is able to use it and wants to communicate. You will see so much of difference when that is there, when you're not just going on and just putting random things, but when it is something that the child likes, you will see that interest build up, you will see that confidence build up, you will see the child wanting to communicate, and it just changes so many things. And you will realize that your child actually has understood so many things even without you knowing it. And you will be shocked to see that your child actually has concepts which you think they wouldn't have had because they are not verbal. So it is very important that AAC implementation, especially those who are on this journey, AAC implementation is not just restricted to a speech therapist, but it is everyone's responsibility, everybody's responsibility. The moment we create that awareness, the moment that training, the moment the modeling, all of that come together, people understand, okay, I can use, and it is like our voice. We never keep our voice away. The same thing for our children. It should be in a way that they can use it in every environment. Communication is at the very core of our relationships. If you are not able to communicate, or if there is no good communication, you're going to feel rejected. If somebody doesn't talk to you properly, if somebody doesn't cater to what you're saying, or they don't really pay attention, what happens? You wouldn't want to go and talk to that person again. And I always tell, we look at our children and we think, okay, they don't know anything. We think that they don't understand what's happening around them. Let me tell you that they understand so much. And just because they don't express it verbally does not mean that they don't understand it. And what happens is that even there was actually a study which says that an AAC device was not abandoned because the child found it hard to use it, but it was abandoned. So it's a big term where we say AAC abandonment, where the child gives up on an AAC, or parents and professionals give up on an AAC. It doesn't happen because the child doesn't know how to use it. It happens because there is not enough opportunities for that child. We all want to rush it. Like I said, we think it's magic. Okay, I've given the device, now my child needs to talk. No, it doesn't happen that way. It has to be taught. It takes time. It is a process that happens. And many a times there are lack of opportunities where some people don't have access to using AACs, or it can be expensive, or people generally don't understand the criteria of how to go about using an AAC device, or it's too complex, or it's too big that people just leave it. So I've had parents in a while, where they would just keep the AAC device at home. Oh, where is it? Like, no, it is too big to carry, or my child can't carry it around. And what happens is you are stealing that voice. You are not allowing your child to have a voice in this world. And those are some of it is difficult. We understand that it is difficult with everything else that you have to deal with, but this is so important. And like I said, it is a human birthright. We all have the right to communicate. We all have the right to speak. We all have the right to communicate. Just that the way we might want to communicate is different doesn't make it wrong. It can be different, but it doesn't make it wrong. So we want to break this at the beginning of this series that we're going to go in. We're going to go into some very in-depth conversations with a lot of professionals from in and around the world, where we're going to be talking about AACs. But we want to set the base here. We want to set it where we say that AAC is not wrong. It's just different, but doesn't mean that our children cannot use it. And if we find ways to cater to them, and if we find ways to make it interesting, and we're able to build in that intent, and they're able to communicate so beautifully, sometimes you're going to hear the most beautiful stories. Sometimes they're going to be telling you things that you didn't even realize, because there's so much that's happening around them. We look out from the outside and we think that we know what's going on, but when you actually listen to them, they have so much that they want to tell. It is a long, and I want to end on this note when I say that AAC and communicating through an AAC is a journey. It's a process. It does not happen overnight. You are going to have ups and downs. You're going to have ways that you will have to learn. But when the people come together with one mind, with one thing, that we want our child to communicate, and we want them to communicate well, not just for their needs. When we understand that, we will be able to open up so many avenues and so many portals for our children to be able to explore, and our children to be able to tell us what exactly they're thinking. So I want to end on this when I say that communicating through AAC is a journey. It doesn't happen in one single moment or in a single day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for this wonderful presentation and talk. And thank you so much for giving us insight into the various myths that surround AAC, not only by parents, but also by professionals. So I hope that your talk has encouraged and has given a clear understanding for parents to motivate their children, or themselves to use AAC more for their children, which again will improve their independence in communication. Also, thank you everybody for joining in for this talk. Please stay tuned for our upcoming videos. May you have a great day. Bye-bye.